Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 136.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on true custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores. I have always been fascinated by the world of long drive, and most years have watched the World Long Drive Championships. A good friend, Alvin Cruz from Crank Golf, manufacturer of long drive heads, and actually crank heads have been played by 22 World Long Drive winners, suggested that I talk with Lance Reeder, the owner of Crank. It sounded like a fun opportunity, but we had more than fun in this interview. I learned a lot of things about driver head performance and what really matters than I really expected to learn. There were at least 2 or 3 times in the interview where I stopped Lance and said, let's go back to that so you can explain a little bit more. We had a fascinating discussion. Pay particular attention to the discussion on moderation and also on bulge and roll. Things I know I needed to know more about. So enjoy this terrific and fascinating interview with Lance Reeder, owner of Crank Golf.
www.gameimprovementgolf.com.
Hello, this is Tony Wright with episode 136 of the Golf Improvement Podcast. Today, I'm excited to get to be speaking with Lance Reeder, who is the owner of Crank Golf.
Hello.
How about that? Crank, I looked on the website, 22 Long Drive World Championships have been won with Crank drivers. And the recent finals of the Long Drive, which I watched as I do almost every year, had 2 golfers, Kyle Berkshire, who won, and Tim Burke, who was second, who played Crank drivers. So it's going to be fun today to talk a little bit about long drive with Lance. So thanks for taking the time to do this. It's taken a little while for us to get this set up, but it's really exciting to get to talk with you today.
I appreciate it. You know what? Anytime I get to talk long drive's a good day. For sure.
It's fascinating. And watching how things have gone over the years has been fascinating about it. It's just taking off. So, well, share a little bit about your story, if you would. How you and I really don't know anything about this. How you got into the golf business and specifically the world of long drive and crank golf. I looked at a little bit of your personal like height specs. It doesn't look like you're one of the big boomer bombers, like some of these guys are these days. Tell us a little bit about you and in the world of long drive.
You bet. Well, I started long driving when I was 39. I think it was my first midlife. I think a lot of long drivers get started because they're a very long hitter in their group of hitters and group of golfers. And I just wanted to know how far I hit the ball. And that's really one of the main ways that anybody starts in long drive. They just want to really know how long they are. And I got started and had fun, and it became very, very addicting early. I won quite a few events, had a lot of fun with it. And I was one of the top hitters, I believe, at the time, 17, 18 years ago. So now, and I just kind of rolled through it. And back then it was Long Drivers of America, and they had a tour and they had a Q school, and it was really, really an interesting time. And, long drive is had so many different phases to where they had very little support at times, and then for those 20 years with Long Drivers of America and Art Challenger, they really put a lot of money and effort into making it work. And it was a fun time, and it was just simply long driving. And, we broke a lot of drivers and broke a lot of shafts, and really getting into crank, the beginning of getting into crank was I was just tired of breaking drivers. And
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like so complicated back then with Cobra and the Cobra team and all of the politics and everything that went with it. So basically the beginning of crank was I believed I could build a driver that didn't break for some reason. I'm not sure because I'm not an engineer, and just started developing and met the right people and had a chance to work with a foundry out of China. And 17 years later, it went from just being fun and a hobby to something a lot more serious.
And I hadn't thought about this for a number of years, but when I started watching Long Drive probably 5-6 years ago, here's a name from the past, Rick Barry, because I used to be addicted to NBA basketball when I was a kid, and I played basketball, right? And I suspect you know him, but I mean, he was pretty accomplished for a while, and I don't know if he's still competing, but doggone it, I don't know how many, sort of master level championships he won, but he did pretty well.
Yeah, he won 5, and he's unbelievable. I mean, he's 6'9". He's a ridiculous athlete, and he was untouchable at those age brackets. But remember, he was competing in the 60 and the 65-year-old division. Those divisions don't exist anymore, so he doesn't compete anymore. So now one of the big changes with Golf Channel, instead of having the open division and then the 45, 50, 55, 60, 65 year old. So, long drivers just never died. They just kept going to the next bracket. And those are gone now. So all we have in long drive is the open division and the masters division, which is 45 and older. And then of course we have the women's division. So, Rick doesn't, he's 75 years old now. He'd love to compete. He would probably still win anything over 65 years old, but he doesn't have a division to compete in. So it's really a shame that we've lost all those guys.
Yeah. He was way out there. So, well,
he was special.
Yeah. Well, I watched, I guess it was about a week ago, the Long Drive Champions came, it came on again on TV and Golf Channel, and, it's really morphed into a great production and fun. But can you share any little things sort of being on the inside at the event, things interesting and fun from your perspectives that kind of happened there that not everybody might know?
Well, I think, long drive, man, it's just crazy. 17, 18 years we've been doing this, and we've done a lot of world championships. We've won 22 times in all the divisions combined. But I think when you go to the World Championship now, it's a lot more serious. Golf Channel's done an amazing job of developing it and giving us a platform that virtually no one else could give us. And then, of course, we have World Long Drive, which is owned by Golf Channel. And I think at the event, again, it's more organized. It's a lot more serious. There's a lot better hitters. Before you would have like a Sadlowski or you'd have a Tim Burke, and you always had 3 or 4 guys. Now we have 15, and it's growing, 15, 16, 17 guys that are legitimate hitters that could win, and that's a big change. And so I think when you go into the World Championship, the serious nature of that one event, and every tour event's serious, but at the World Championship you have like 96 hitters in the open division, and it's turning into a very, very professional production, and everyone's taking it serious like that. So it's being behind the ropes and working with all of our hitters and all Team Crank. And I mean, it's a big brotherhood and a sisterhood. I mean, everybody's gets along, even if they're not hitting crank. And really at this point, it's really Crank and Callaway. So we all get along. We're all friends, but it's a very serious competition. And it's interesting to see the amount of work and effort that these guys are doing on a full-time basis. I mean, a lot of these guys are now full-time, nothing but long drive, which is really awesome.
And I remember, and I wish I remembered the competitor's name, but there was one guy who got to at least the quarterfinals, I think, and he had started, at the lower ends of it. And so he hit an awful lot of balls. So, not just strength, but endurance is a big deal now, right?
Hot. Yeah, and we're having the event in August and early September. It's really hot. And Thackerville's really hot. And it really pushed everybody. It really pushed the hitters, but it pushed the spectators. I mean, there were people taken to the hospital.
Oh, goodness.
From heat exhaustion out of the stands. And then these amazing volunteers from WinStar and that whole area, they're out there just sweating bullets for 8 hours, 9, 10 hours a day. It's really remarkable. So they have to be in shape. They mentally have to be in shape. You have to time how many balls you want to hit. Kyle Berkshire, won it, and he's 22, young, hits 400 or 500 balls a day on a regular basis. He's super into what he does. And so he kind of gets through it. But I think some of these guys that are remarkable, like Jeff Gavin, who's 51 years old, hitting in the senior and the open division.
Wow, yeah.
It's remarkable to watch. Like, you're worried about him. You can only sweat so much in a day, and he literally is soaked from his head to his ankles. It's unbelievable. But they have to be in great shape. Mentally, they have to be able to get through that 3 minutes. To me, it's the most maddening 3 minutes because everything's on the line every time you get up to hit. And TV doesn't show that at the level that it's really happening.
And Berkshire, I guess, wasn't it in the quarters where he got to the last ball? I think you're going, right? I mean, that was fascinating, right? And he had done that before at other levels. He probably just doesn't let that pressure get him, and it's got to go up and do it.
You know what? A lot of these guys get down to one ball, and it's remarkable how many people didn't hit that eighth ball in.
Yeah,
and it's a lot more difficult. There's so much more to it, and I know on television it looks like the ball's just flying sideways. The ball's kind of tough to hit straight. This specific ball, not to speak poorly of Volvic, but it's a little more difficult ball to hit straight and at full speed. And when you're swinging 150 plus miles an hour and 145 plus miles an hour, it's that 51-yard grid, which is what the World Championship was, which to me is narrow for a World Championship, really puts an unbelievable amount of stress on these guys, and they're just begging for a ball to get in the grid. And when people say, well, these guys aren't that good at golfers, well, most of them are actually scratch golfers, really good golfers, but swinging 150 plus, squaring up a ball is a lot more difficult than people even understand.
And get in the face and pass somewhere close to each other so that it gets in, right? And in my club fitter lingo, yeah. Well, for our listeners today, a lot of them probably know, but talk a little bit about, some of the elements of what a long drive club looks like. The lofts. I know there's a specific length. I'm not sure everybody plays the maximum length, but many of them do, and kind of the types of shafts, and even if there's any differences in the kind of grips that these guys use compared to standard golf clubs.
Right. Okay. Great question. Because I think a lot of people, even to this day, over all these years, think that long drive drivers are not conforming USG. They are conforming, and they've had to be conforming now for 20 years. And so, what makes a long drive driver is usually because it's very low lofted. And so at crank, we make 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 degrees.
Yeah.
And the maximum length is 48 inches. That's set by the USGA, and World Long Drive follows those rules. They have to conform to spring effect, which is called CT, characteristic time. It can't be above 257 in a new or a used state. And they randomly test at Worlds, and if they find something, they take it out of play, and you can't use it. And but you've got a 48-inch driver. You've got shafts that range from regular flex all the way to 4X stiffness, depending on what people want to hit. And you're usually playing somewhere in the 3, 4, or 5 degree range. And that's really what sets it apart. Most people play full length at 48. about, I think, probably 10 years ago, they started regulating length. 12 years ago, there were guys swinging 70-inch drivers, 65-inch drivers, 60-inch, 72. Van Rensburg made it to the final 8 with a 65-inch driver. Carl Walter won with a 55-inch driver. And what ended up happening was it just looked like it wasn't viable for the game of golf, and people didn't look at it as real. So then they made it to where it could be 52 inches. Then they made it 50 inches, and then the USGA came out with a rule stating that the maximum length was 48. So we are now 48. And 48's, if 45 and a half is standard length, so it's 2.5 inches longer. It's not really that big of a change. At least we're a viable driver length now.
Now, you said something that sort of snuck in there, but I'm not going to go by because it got my ear, and you said some of them are playing a regular flex shaft. Some of the really fast swingers are doing that. Is that true? Or is it
Believe it or not, Kyle Berkshire won with a regular flex shaft, with a Patterson shaft. Really interesting scenarios. I think in the sport of long drive right now, you have Fujikura,
right,
which does 2 shafts, Flywire and Groove. That's mainly sold through Crank. And then you've got House of Forged, which has been around for a long time and make an amazing shaft. And then you've got Patterson. So Patterson came out with a shaft, and they've had it out for a while. And Kyle Berkshire in Rochester decided to hit it, and it's only 238 cycles at 48 inches. That's a regular flex. And he was striping it. Well, Kyle Berkshire stripes everything, and he's just an amazing hitter, right?
Right.
And it increased his swing speed, and it increased his ball speed, and the shaft didn't break, and he was hitting it straight. And he literally, for the first time, committed to it for an entire event in Rochester and never lost, and hit that. It was a 65-yard wide grid, and that kid just pounded it and never lost and won the whole event. And that set off a chain of events with a lot of people now trying that shaft, which had really never been considered in the past. So quite a few people hit it at Worlds.
I did see there were a number of Patterson shafts when I was watching.
Yep.
Yeah.
And most of them went to this 238, and, choose your poison. It's faster. It may be a little more spin. It's faster swing speed. It snaps faster. If you can put it in the grid, you're probably going to hit it further. And a lot of people went to it. Kyle Berkshire won with it. A lot of people went OB with it as well. So, again, we're drag racing here. So if you really want to go at the highest speed, and it was something that just occurred this year. So outside of that one shaft, everyone else is hitting probably 2X, 3X, 4X. But a number of the top hitters actually hit that 238 cycle shaft at Worlds and did really well with it. But, a lot of them went OB with it as well.
Well, I'm glad you talked about that because that's so fascinating. That probably is going to be an arena where people are going to start thinking a little bit out of the box more in the future about shafts, I'm guessing, because it's so different. Wow.
Again, this isn't putting.
Yeah.
We don't hit wedges. We don't hit irons. We hit one club.
Yeah. And
that one club is really geared to how far can you hit a ball within the lines. And if you feel like you can get an advantage over doing something like what Kyle did, go for it. And a lot of people just straight up told me, this is a faster shaft for us. And so, but at the same time, is it all real? Just because Kyle won with it doesn't mean that it's for everybody. And, the Flywires won 9 world championships. The Grooves won 5. Some of the very longest balls, most of the longest balls were hit with a Flywire at Worlds, which may be conditions based at the time, but there's a lot of great shafts to choose from, and you have to choose what works best for you, that you can hit straight under pressure. Because remember, hitting on the range, everyone's a king of the range, right?
Yeah.
It's really what you do with the ball you're having to hit when the 3 minutes is clicking, and what happens to your swing during that immense amount of pressure. And so we like fitting people for when they're competing more so than when they're on the range.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Well,
Yeah.
You said it yourself. I guess one of the things that got you into crank was trying to make things that don't break. What are some of the important things from a head technology standpoint that make a head to be something that a competitor wants to play with?
Well, I think the thing that I'm most passionate about is driver design, and at the end of the day, we live in the world of long drive. We live in the most extreme condition of any driver, or these guys are swinging at the levels that they are. So really my passion was, how do I build a driver that is faster and has better spin and the face flattens less and it doesn't break and it doesn't migrate. Migration's a big part of long drive, and it has been for a long time, that as you hit a driver, it gets a little hotter. But as it gets a little hotter, that CT number starts to creep up, and it cannot go above 257. So we've been held to this standard in long drive even when the PGA Tour wasn't. This is the first year that they've now made a new rule on the PGA Tour that any head tested over 257 would be pulled from play. And so that's kind of what you're seeing. So no longer, they've abolished 4-1B, which says any head tested conforming new can never be deemed non-conforming during normal play. That's now gone. So any head in a new or used state over 257 in the entire world of professional golf or long drive will be pulled from play if it's found through testing. So all these things came into play, and we've been living on this level well before the PGA Tour is now having to this very year. And Greenboro was the first one that the USJ showed up and tested drivers from Monday to Wednesday. So we've been living in that world. So you had to make this driver that didn't just break, but it didn't migrate, it didn't flatten. It had great balance and spin control. And we nailed it. We nailed it from the beginning. The El Diablo was the fastest driver, and the USJ put it on review for 9 months just to try to figure out why it was so fast and it was conforming. And so we discovered these things, and making a driver for these animals is completely different than making a plain driver. But in the end, if you can make that driver, which virtually everybody has quit except for Callaway and Crank, you can take that driver and you can thin the face out and make a remarkable plain driver out of it. And then, of course, we now moved into the high core world. So,
yeah.
And also remember, we build a cut face forged driver that's not a cast insert face driver. So Callaway, TaylorMade, Titleist, and Ping, and Cobra, and they all make a cast driver with an insert face. I don't cast. I've never casted. We build a forged driver, which allows us to heat treat the titanium, the beta that we use, to a super, super hard level, which allows us to go thinner. And it's very resistant to flattening, and it's unbelievably durable, and they're all handmade. So at the end of the day, I couldn't build a cast driver like I can build a forged driver, because it wouldn't hold up. It wouldn't give me the ball speed. It wouldn't give me the durability. So we live in that world. We're 4.5 times harder than a Callaway face. So it's going to be hotter. It's going to last longer. And Kyle Berkshire puts 5,000 balls on a crank driver and still can compete with it at 155 miles an hour swing speed. So at the end of the day, it's really understanding what their needs are. And once we did that, we realized, hey, you know what? We can make a playing driver out of it. So even in the world of long drive, winning 22 times, it's still only 2% of our sales.
Yeah.
98% of our sales is regular playing drivers.
Well, that's interesting. Now, you said something, too, that, I hadn't thought about, and metallurgy was not my, material science was not my favorite engineering class, okay? All right. But so actually the fact that the clubs are being hit actually is changing the CT of the face, which I had never heard about. And I guess maybe it's because at this level, there's something happening a little different. Well, of course, at the tour level, it could be too, though, right?
Of course.
Just maybe a little bit about that. Yeah.
Oh, it's one of my favorite subjects.
Okay, well then talk as much as you want.
Well, I mean, the real truth is metallurgy's really interesting because, we have bulge and roll.
Yeah.
I've had pros that have won $15 million, $20 million walk in crank and go, hey, this driver used to be really good. It just doesn't hit anywhere. And I said, well, what's the bulge and roll? And they go, what's that? And I go, what? The bulge and roll in the face of your driver. They go, what's that? So I pull my bulge and roll gauge out, and it started at, let's say, 10.5. It's now at 18. I go, you're not going to be able to hit that driver like you hit it new. It's lost its gear effect. It's lost its spring effect. You have very little control of where it goes, and it's lost its pop. And they're like, wow, didn't know that. I said, how do you not know that? No one checks bulge and roll, and yet in the world of long drive, it's like the most important thing you could ever do, because not only as the face gets flatter does the number go up, and you're scared to go above that 257, right? But also, it stops springing back. And as it stops to spring back, you now lose ball speed. So the ironic thing in long drive is Kyle Berkshire, 257 is the highest number in CT. Once he gets above about 245, his ball speed starts to go down at his swing speed. So it makes no sense for me to give a Kyle Berkshire or a Tim Burke or a Justin James a driver that's over 245 because he's actually losing ball speed. So it's the nature of spring effect. It's the nature of metal and the type of metal we use. So they've been testing in long drive for over a decade. All they're really doing for the top guys is they're pulling out drivers that they shouldn't be hitting anyway. And crank never migrates over. We failed 0 Formula X's at Worlds this year and 0 last year because I don't allow my drivers to be in that position because it hurts my hitters. And if we want to win, you have to give them the best that they can have. So migration's that way. But when it comes to a playing driver, if you're swinging over 110, cast drivers flatten quickly. And you need to pay attention to the bulge and roll. You look at it and you go, it looks new to me, it looks good to me. Well, the truth is, moving that driver from an 11 bulge and roll to a 16 or 17 means it's really not giving you the type of performance that you were used to when it was new. So it's a big deal to me. It's why we win. You can't build a cast driver that holds up to the flattening like you can a cup face forged, a super hardened forged driver. There's just no comparison between the two.
So if I'm seeing then it, and I don't see the 110 guys even, not long drive, but if I'm seeing one of those, I better have a bulge and roll gauge if they've got, if they've got a driver that they've had for a while and see if it's what they think it is. They probably don't know what it is.
They don't know. I mean, people don't care. Yeah. I carry a bulge and roll gauge around with me half my life, but
yeah,
it's the nature of what we do, but you'd be surprised on how flat drivers are even at 80, 90 miles an hour swing speed.
Okay.
They flatten quicker than people realize. So it's something to look at, especially if you're a little harder hitter. Really our claim to fame is not just long drive. Our claim to fame is our playing driver doesn't flatten either.
Yeah.
It's much thinner than our long drive club. And as you get into the high spring effect world, which is really where crank's headed, in recreational play to really maximize the older golfer, to enjoy the game more, you really have to get to live in the 320 CT and the 360 CT world. Your metals have to be so hard so you can go super thin so that there really shows a benefit, right?
Yeah.
And so part of, again, the biggest story with crank is the only reason we know how to build the playing driver is because we know how to build the long drive club. And without that knowledge, and no one ever goes there, the majors don't go there. I mean, Ping doesn't show up to long drive. Why? Because the drivers would last 10 balls. So no one really takes that world on, and yet that's the world that I took on out of just a hobby, and we ended up just being really good at building amazing drivers for these guys that swing like that.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about shafts. Are there any other, sort of hidden things that I don't know? My initial impression is, the long drive shafts are going to be real low torque, and we already talked about flex and anything, for example, about flex profiles that seem to be a little different with long drive shafts.
I think, there's, I'm a head developer.
Yeah.
Fujikura is an amazing shaft company. And so I don't spend a lot of time on the development of shafts. I'm a very good observer.
Yeah.
And I find stuff that really, shafts that are all from around the world that are really remarkable and very expensive. And you know what? Some of them actually do hit the ball straighter. Because my belief is, number one, your swing determines mostly why you hit it straight.
Yeah.
Number two, it's the shaft. And then number three, it could be the driver head. So on direction. So as I see that stuff, I'll work with Fujikura and saying, hey, this shaft right here is unbelievable. Profile it. Let's see what it is. Let's make. That's how we made the groove. And then the fly wire is so light. It's the lightest shaft in long drive. And Tim Burke won with it in 2013. Joe Miller won with it. It's 52 grams at 48 inches, and it's a low torque, unbelievable graphite shaft. So they're the ones that build it. I think Patterson's doing a great job. I think House of Ford's doing a great job. They make and they dedicate to high swing speed, and some are mid kick, some of them are high kick, some of them are low kick. It's what you feel is best for you, and you go find and if you can hit it in the grid and you can hit it hard, you have a chance. So I find the shaft world remarkable. Definitely not a world that I'm going to spend a lot of time in, because our focus is head development, and then we go find the best shafts in the world to make sure that they give us a good directional hit.
Yeah. Well, the next question, I feel when I watch the ladies and see them swing and it's 120 miles an hour, I mean, that kind of freaked me out. I had no idea they were in that world, which is still phenomenal, right, for most normal human beings. What are some of the differences that you typically see between the clubs that the women and the over 45s play? Now, maybe the over 45 men are still playing pretty much what the younger people are, but any comments on that area?
That's a great question, because the truth of the matter is, again, I'm going to go back to CT or spring effect core, right? Remember, CT is a pendulum tester that it only emulates core. Remember, core is the only thing that really measures anything. The CT machine is just relevant to core. And it's a portable machine they can take out and test faces. And so it's quite accurate in its new metal state. It can be very inaccurate at a used metal state. And that's been one of the big complaints, is that as the face becomes more malleable, it's not necessarily reflecting what its true core is anyway, holding subject. But when it comes to women compared to men in long drive, certainly women benefit from a higher CT, and so do golfers. So if you really want to go to the extremes, you go to the extreme of Kyle Berkshire, is the fastest in the world, holds every record now. He's swinging up to 158 miles an hour. Well, what in the world do you make that guy? What's his CT range? Well, what about Cassandra Myers, who's an up-and-comer, and Phyllis Meddy, who's won all these times? They really do benefit from a higher CT. So a Kyle Berkshire's fastest ball speed is probably 240 CT. And a Phyllis Meddy's fastest ball speed is probably 250 CT. So do you make heads more swing specific for the women and compared to the men? You have to. And nobody really wants to do that. But remember that 250 CT for a Phyllis Meddy swinging 120. And what about somebody swinging 100 miles an hour? What's their maximum ball speed in CT range? Probably 265, which is above 257, which would make it non-conforming. So as we roll through this whole world of what I live in, I've been swing specific to my hitters as best I can to make sure that they're getting the best opportunity to win. But for the women need more CT to maximize their spring effect, and we do the best that we can to make sure that they have that type of product in their hand. But they don't swing fast enough to load a 230 CT head. They won't get the most out of it. So That's the main difference. And then, of course, whatever shaft they're hitting. But you're seeing in the women, like Alexa, and some of these girls are still swinging, playing normal playing length drivers, 9 degree. Phyllis Meddy hits a 10 degree. You know, Cassandra Myers hits a 5 degree. So, 48 inches. Some are swinging 46 inches. It's just, the women's tour is developing. There's a lot of women out there that could pound it and come into long drive. I'm not sure why we're not getting more traction from some of the harder hitting women that are in golf, because the purses are quite good now for the women. And I'm hoping that they draw more attention to that and that they come out and compete, because even in the world of men's long drive, there are men out there that could come and compete at a very high level immediately that just choose not to right now. So hopefully over the next 3 or 4 or 5 years, everybody gets more traction and we just get better athletes to come out and compete against a Phyllis Meddy who's swinging in the 120s for a woman. And there are a lot of women that could do that. They just haven't shown up yet.
Well, I seem to remember she, at one event, hit a 400-yard drive, didn't she?
She did, but remember the conditions play a massive role. I mean, in 2004, I hit the longest ball ever hit at 526 yards in Albuquerque at a Pro Tour event for LDA. Well, we were hitting in Albuquerque at 6,000 feet. We were hitting, at Balloon Fiesta Park, and you couldn't put a tee in the ground, and it was blowing 25 tail. So, the difference between conditions can be 200 yards, more than 200 in one day. So the ball is greatly affected by wind and conditions. So that day, good for Phyllis. She killed it 400-something yards and set the longest ball ever hit. But the conditions were perfect at the moment.
That's a nice thing to have, though, to promote the world of things, though, too, I think. Right?
Absolutely. It's a lot more fun when they're pounding balls over 400 yards.
Yeah.
Like Ak-Chin with Tim Burke against Cal Berkshire, that 474 yards, rolling on the line. It's one of the greatest hits ever in the history of long drive, for sure.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit around it. I know there are differences in the heads that you have, obviously, for long drive for the sort of mortal people, and I also know you're getting into providing drivers for people who don't mind playing things that that aren't conforming, and not everybody wants to do that, but some people do, and talk about that whole arena of the conforming and non-conforming and the clubs for the I'm a maybe 90-mile-an-hour person myself right now, right? But those kind of people. Which is still a good swing speed. But here's the way we look at it. The game of golf is supposed to be fun. And we have the technology to make super high spring effect drivers for recreational play. And when, I've talked to the USGA about it, they called me, why are we doing it? And, we were making these for Asia for the last 2 years, and I finally decided to bring it into the U.S. and really see. And it's a bit controversial, but it really comes down to this. I get a call from a 70-year-old man or woman saying I'm hitting 180 yards all the time. I was told to call Crank because you guys might be able to help me because it's not that much fun anymore. I'm going, well, you're hitting a 245 CT head that's provided by the majors, probably. It's being controlled by the USGA for spring effect, but you're out playing with your wife and your friends. If I put you in a 320 CT driver that doesn't break and doesn't flatten at your 85 miles an hour swing speed or 90 or 100 or 60 or 70, it's across the board, you're going to hit the ball further and you're going to enjoy the game more. You can't compete with it, but you can enjoy it. And if that's something, and how big is that market? For me to compete in the normal conforming playing driver world is extremely difficult because it's so busy. It's so many drivers and so many hundreds of millions of dollars spent by the majors in this market. Even though I think my playing driver that's conforming, the Formula X Extreme, out-hits all of them. But I'm willing to go into the super thin 1.8 millimeter thick faces that are over 320 CT and hand it to somebody that's just out having fun. Well, it's now become my number one selling driver in America and worldwide, not by a little, by a lot.
And people are calling up saying, I just want to enjoy the game more. And here's my question. Why are we holding recreational players, especially older golfers, and I mean older, maybe even 40-year-old, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90-year-old golfers, to a PGA, USGA mandate spring effect? It makes no sense. Let's go enjoy the game more. If you're going to go play in a tournament, you know what? You have to play a conforming tournament. Can't use it. But if you're out playing with your friends and your wife and you're retired, why in the world would you not just enjoy another 20 yards? It's legitimately 20 yards. It could be 25. It could be 30. So why not enjoy the game more? These guys and gals have so much time on their hands to go out and play golf. They're committed to the game. They invest a lot of money and time and enjoyment in the game. Let's go maximize what that is. I don't consider it cheating.
Yeah.
And I do know for a fact it's 20 plus yards. So our driver faces and our manufacturing method is straight up different. Our driver faces are harder so we can go thinner. And because we go thinner, they go faster. And if it wasn't the truth, then why is the USGA even monitoring spring effect?
Yeah.
It is true. It's pure science. So let's just go out and enjoy the game. If you're going to compete, stay conforming. If you want a long drive, you can get those heads. You choose what you want to do. And we have a lot of people that will buy, well, I'm playing in some events I like to compete in. So they get a Formula X Extreme conforming head, and they get a Formula XX Extreme non-conforming head, and they unscrew them and change them out.
Yeah.
It's all about the fun of the game. And we're going to hit this market as hard as we possibly can, and we've already started. It's a real market out there that I can compete in.
Now, you said something, again, that I think maybe sort of snuck in there, and I don't want to talk about any specific companies if come to mind, but you said that some of the drivers are at a CT of 245?
Most of them are.
Most of them are?
And they have...
Even though then... So golfers, I mean, they're leaving something in the bag if they could get a 257 and be conforming anyhow, right?
Yeah, well, you got to remember the majors, the cast builders, the cast insert face builders, are now being held to a different standard.
Yeah.
Okay, they can't push CT because of one word called migration.
Yeah.
And they can't afford. And you got to remember, CT is so finite that here's an example: if the face is made 1/10 of a millimeter thicker, that's 10 CT points in either direction. So making perfect CT, knowing that migration is going to occur, and knowing that now the USGA is going to be testing for that, they're going to check it. Now, you're not going to check it at your men's club. They're not going to check it. They're not even checking it on the mini golf tours right now. But I think in the end, I think CT machines are going to be everywhere. And so they can't push it because there is migration. And a cast driver migrates twice as much as a forged driver. So I don't believe they're going to be playing in the 245 world. I think they're going to be playing in the 235, 230, and 235 world from now on, because they're now at risk of being tested in a used state. And so a forged driver at 100 and let's say 10 miles an hour will migrate 10 points over its lifetime. A cast driver can migrate up to 24 points. So, I, as a forged builder, a cut force and super hardened, I can go a lot hotter new without worrying about over migration.
Yeah.
Whereas the cast drivers really have to take that into consideration, and that means performance is going to go down for them.
This has been, boy, I learned a lot of stuff here today. A lot of things that I had no idea. But of course, Alvin said you are the repository of a lot of this information, right? And he wasn't kidding. Any little success stories about, any particular things that you want to share? Whatever.
I think, the fanaticism around long drive, the passion of these guys, and being there when we win these world championships, even though I've never won one. I finished third one year in the Masters division at Worlds, which was a great thrill for me. But these athletes are absolutely remarkable, and I think Tim Burke winning in 2013 was one of the greatest moments of literally of any sports experience in my life. But, you know, and watching Tim win the second time and watching Kyle win, there's so much time and effort put into this by the hitters. And I really wish that Golf Channel, as good a job as they do, it's really tough to show on television the amount of stress and that 3 minutes of madness.
Yeah.
And so I think, you know, winning world championships, Rick Barry winning, all of our hitters that have won world championships, those are really special moments, because to get to that final two and really getting through that entire event is way harder than people realize. And I've told Golf Channel, you guys need to take footage of what's happening before we get to the final 16 or before we get to the final 8. That's the best story going, because it's just absolute mayhem. There's just so much anxiety and effort, and dreams are broken, and yet people are continuing to get through this process. So I'm hoping that they continue to improve on how they show it. It's very difficult, and they do an amazing job, but there's so much more to the story. So as far as for me, in my 18 years of doing this, I mean, really watching our champions win, I think me hitting those 500-yard balls was something that really motivated me to go forward with Crank at the time. And, you know, hopefully we have a lot more of that going on in the future, because I can tell you the long drive is growing. We've got the amateur long drive world now with amateurlongdrive.com. For the people that just want to get started, I'm going to support them, because I believe there's a lot of people, and they have all the age brackets. They've got the juniors, they've got women. If you want to just come out and sling balls and have fun, and you're 80, 70, 60, 50, 40, 12 years old, come out and go have some fun. It is a lot of fun, and it'll get your heart racing for sure.
The Tim Burke story you talked about, that was Las Vegas, wasn't it?
That was Las Vegas at the Speedway.
I almost, my brother lives in Las Vegas. I almost hopped on a plane to go there. And then I backed out, but it was amazing to watch that. That was a pretty cool venue.
That was a great, at the time we didn't realize how great it was. I just knew that if he hit a ball, he was going to win. Our drivers, we've made a lot of great drivers, but our spring effect on our drivers, and they were completely conforming, was a huge advantage over the competitors' drivers. And I just knew that Tim just had to square one ball, and if he did, he was going to win. And he did. And it was amazing.
Well, I want to thank you for this today. It was, I don't know how many of these you're doing with people, but I know my club fitting friends and all the golfers who listen are really going to dive into this one. Any final words that you want to have here at the end?
Yeah, I think at the end, I think everyone, in the world of golf, is so traditional. I really believe this, and this is really where we're headed as a company, is we are about driver performance. We are far more moving into the world of swing speed specific. And we have the type of driver manufacturing that we can do it. And I think everyone needs to take a step back and respect the USGA for what they do, because without them, we'd be in trouble on many fronts. But as we go into recreational play, as we get older, the game is supposed to be about enjoyment. We're not always competing every single time we play. We're out there having fun. And that fitters in general, I think, need to really look at saying, what's really going to grow the sport? What's really going to make it better? And I personally believe the driver is such a big part of the sport that if we can maximize a swing at 75 years old for a woman and 60-year-old for a man and 80-year-old for a man, why not do it? We can do it, and they can enjoy the game more. Let's keep them relevant. And so my whole point is, as much as I love long drive, it's a very small market for us. It's a passionate market for us, but it's still our main our main play here is how do we make the game better, more fun for amateur golfers and having fun. So that's really my final statement.
Yeah. Well, again, thanks for this. And, I didn't get a chance to look at it yet, but you actually have a little ebook on your site. What is it? Quiet driving or something?
Golf.
I'm looking
Quiet
forward
golf.
to reading that.
Yeah, it's it really talks about eliminating unnecessary body motion.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make pros. I'm trying to say that the majority of the mistakes people make in hitting a driver is excessive motion and especially excessive lower body motion and too much sliding. So it's a concept to keep everything really quiet. And when you do that, you hit the ball straighter. And I tell you right now, with long drive, people buy crank drivers and they go out there and just swing them faster, or they try to because we're long drive and they're supposed to hit further. Our number one thing to everybody is don't do that. Put the best, most beautiful golf swing on it, eliminate unnecessary lower body motion, and let the club perform, and you will enjoy the game better. It's not about long driving on the course. You only get one ball.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, Lance, thank you again for this today. I'm going to put some links in the show notes to to your site, any other things that you guys asked me to do that. But I learned a lot about. I mean, it's just not taking a driver and moving it to 2 or 3 degrees aloft. And the whole world of USGA and and the concept of migration, which I never had heard about before. So it's been a delight to get to talk with you. If you just hang in a minute after I push the stop button, I just look forward to just saying a few other things. But thank you again.
Absolutely, Tony. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about things that we're very, very passionate about. Yeah. We appreciate it.
Game Improvement Golf. I create exceptional golf clubs. You shoot lower scores.
Well, Lance, thank you for this interview and for sharing so much valuable information for golfers and for true custom club fitters. I hope all of you could get the picture that Lance is really excited about what he gets to do and all of the things he's learned. I certainly have put off buying a bulge and roll gauge for a long time, but this is something I'm going to get in the near future. If you've never checked out Crank Golf Heads, I put a link to their website in the show notes, and many of my AGCP club fitting friends custom fit with their heads. Actually, Crank is an AGCP sponsor, and they've had great results with them. My shout out today is to 2 people, Chris Hillary and Chris Jorgensen, or CJ, from Aerotech Golf. Aerotech steel fiber composite golf shafts are my personal go-to graphite golf shaft, in particular for golfers over the age of 50. Chris is the owner of Aerotech. I've done a past interview with him and have known him for, I think, more than 10 years. I just completed a new iron build with Aerotechs for a friend who lives in Las Vegas. And CJ, as he always does for me, handpicks the shafts that I get. And this allows me to make a great set of golf clubs even better. Thanks, Chris and CJ. Well, that's it for today. In 2 weeks, welcome back quickly. A 3-way podcast interview with the authors of a great brand new golf improvement book, The Lost Art of Golf, just about to be published. I'll be speaking again with Gary Nickel and Carl Morris, and you'll enjoy the content in this one to help you to play your best golf. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com